Hey YouTube, it's Guy. Today I wanted to do a little side-by-side comparison of two relatively recently reviewed watches on the channel. On the left we have the Citizen Nighthawk, and on the right we have the Seiko Flightmaster model SNA411. Now, again, these were both relatively recently reviewed. If you want to see the full reviews, I encourage you to check out those previous videos. This is not going to be a complete and thorough review of each watch. It's more just a little side-by-side comparison on two fairly similar watches from two different manufacturers. Now, again, on the left we have the Citizen Nighthawk. On the right we have the Seiko Flightmaster SNA411. Again, these are both very similar watches. They're both flight watches, pilot watches, aviation pieces, however you'd like to describe them. They both feature several similarities in both design and style, but they are both capable of standing on their own. There's enough differences to where you might consider picking one over the other, or possibly having both in your collection. So yeah, we're going to jump in here and again just take a look at them side by side. So I'll pull them up closer to the camera here and give you a look at them up close. First thing I want to talk about are the dimensions. The case dimensions on these watches are very, very close. I mean, they're almost the same size, but when you look at them, it doesn't really appear that way. To me, the one on the left, the Citizen, kind of feels like a larger watch, and really it's hardly larger. Both cases have a diameter of 42 millimeters. They have the exact same case diameter. The case thicknesses on the Citizen on the left, you're looking at 13 millimeters. And on the, the Citizen is 12 millimeters and the Seiko is 13 millimeters. Now that's the listed specs that I found online. However, if I look at them myself, to me the Citizen looks thicker. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and take my caliper, which is on the table over here behind me, and I'm going to measure it for myself, because it feels to me that you know, the Citizen is probably 12 and a half, almost 13. So what the specs that I found online call it 12. It's a little shy of 13, but it's over 12 on my caliper. And let's look at the thickness of the Seiko here. I don't think it's as thick as 13 as they say it is online, but let's look. Yeah, it is. It's about 13 millimeters thick if you include that domed crystal. So, you know, there you go. Proof positive is, I guess, technically the Seiko on the left here is a little bit thicker. It doesn't look like it, though, when you look at them side by side. To me, the Citizen looks thicker, so that's pretty interesting. The lug width, we'll talk about that on these watches, where the bracelets connect to the watch, is 22 millimeters on the Citizen, but 20 millimeters on the Seiko. Visually, it's hard to even notice much of a difference. Lug to lug. Now, that is the dimensions from the top of the lug to the bottom of the lug. And here's where you get the biggest difference. On the Citizen, it's 46, maybe almost 46 and a half. Whereas on the Seiko, from the top to the bottom of the lug, I measured it out at 44 millimeters. And I'm holding this watch upside down. So the overall width from lug to lug is a little bit shorter on the Seiko. So basically, you know, that's the only dimension that's significantly different. But in my opinion, I feel like the Citizen appears visually larger for whatever reason. Now we'll talk about real quick the similarities that these watches share. They both have a date window at the 3 o'clock position. On the Citizen, you can see there it's black text on a white dial. Also on the Seiko, black text on a white dial. They both have a date complication. They're both 200-meter water-resistant watches, and they both have screw-down crowns. Now, of course, the Seiko has pushers for the chronograph that also screw down. The Citizen doesn't have a chronograph. It does have a crown for its internal slide bezel, though. We'll talk about those differences a little bit later, though. Both of these use accurate quartz movements, and they both do have slide rule bezels as opposed to elapsed time bezels like you would find on a dive watch. So those are some of the similarities. Visually, just design-wise, you can look at these and you can say like, yeah, they're both flight watches. They both have very busy, complicated-looking dials. I mean, while I'm gonna list off a lot of differences between these two watches, I think they're more similar than they are different. Now, speaking of some of the differences, first of all, the crystal. On the Seiko, we have this domed crystal. It is a Seiko Hardlex crystal, I believe. I can't remember now. I believe it's a Hardlex crystal, not sapphire, but it is a domed crystal, and that dome aids in the legibility of our watch. It sort of magnifies that very busy dial a little bit. On the other hand, the crystal is on the Citizen is a flat mineral crystal, so there is no added magnification for having that domed effect going on. However, it is anti-reflective coated. So in bright light, and I don't know if this will show up well here, it's a little less reflective. On my studio lights, it's probably not that apparent, but when you're out in the sun, the anti-reflective coating that is supposedly on this Citizen watch does make it a little bit more legible, again, in bright sunlight. Now, the cases, while the dimensions are very, very similar, the design is significantly different. On the Seiko, we have some polished surfaces with a little bit of brushed surfaces, particularly on the top sides of the lugs. The entire case on the Citizen is basically all brushed. Also, a big difference is, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, but it's sort of relevant to the case discussion. The Seiko has an external bezel, a little bit more traditional, while the bezel on the Citizen is an internal slide rule bezel. Now, what that does as far as the design is it makes the Citizen look, to me, bigger because it's just all dial. There's very, very little case surrounding the dial, where you have a lot of metal, the case, the bezel, whatever you want to call it, surrounding the dial on the Seiko. So aesthetically or visually, that's where, in my opinion, it makes the Citizen kind of look larger. That dial with the internal slide rule bezel just sort of overwhelms the case, because when you're looking down at it, you don't see, any real extra metal around the crystal and around the dial. It's just a design choice that they went with. Both look good in my opinion. I kind of favor the design of the case on the Seiko though, both because it has that shorter lug-to-lug width, and because it's got, I don't know, sort of smoother lines. All the edges are kind of rounded off, which is very typical of Seiko watches. They're very good at dehorning all of the edges. Everything's nice and smooth and sweeping. On the Citizen, the case, everything is very angular, very hard lines. And it's not to say that it's sharp. It's not to say that it bites into your skin or is uncomfortable. It's just definitely designed differently. If you look at the way that the lines run around the lugs, around the case, everything is very angular, very, very hard lines. That's just what they were going for on the design of that watch. Apples and oranges, I suppose. Both of these are powered by batteries, so to speak. The Seiko is powered... Oh, sorry about that. The Seiko is powered by a traditional battery source. The Citizen is powered by their Eco-Drive solar-powered rechargeable battery cell. So, you're going to get the benefit of never having to replace the battery on the Citizen. As a matter of fact, the Citizen claims that you will never have to replace that rechargeable battery or power cell. That's pretty impressive if that's true. I find that claim to be a little dubious. I've never heard of a rechargeable battery being, lasting forever. The more and more you recharge them, the more and more they wear out. And eventually, be it a cell phone, be it a video game controller, anything with a rechargeable battery, eventually you recharge them so many times that they start to fail. But Citizen claims that the power source or the power cell in this Nighthawk will last a lifetime, I believe is how they worded it. So, that is what it is. We'll see, I guess. Now, the Citizen watch has, at the 9 o'clock side, from 12 to 6, that semicircle dual time zone. with the red scale and then the inner white scale. And you have that little plain, get in real close here so you can see it. There's that little airplane hand that points to the current GMT or 24-hour time, or it could be a dual time zone, however you want to set it up. The Seiko has an alarm subdial, and you could use that subdial as another time zone if you wanted to, but it's really meant to be, and that's at the 6 o'clock position, by the way. That alarm subdial is really meant for you to set an alarm notification. But, you could have dual time zones on either one of these watches if you wanted to, but it's really not meant for a dual time zone on the Seiko, I don't think, whereas it's explicitly for that on the Citizen. Now, the Seiko has a chronograph feature. You have top and a bottom pushers to start, stop, and pause and reset your chronograph. Those are screw down. There is no chronograph on the Citizen watch at all, so that's a pretty big difference. If you need a chronograph, that's probably debatable for the average person, but, it's a difference that I wanted to point out and make clear that while these both are very similar flight or aviation or pilot watches, that is one of the main points of difference. The bracelets on these are quite a bit different. While the lug width on the Citizen watch here on the left is 22 millimeters and it's only 20 millimeters on the Seiko, the bracelet tapers down quite a bit on the Citizen watch here. You can see it starts out fairly wide and it tapers down. As a matter of fact, I'm curious, I've never measured it, so let's go ahead. How narrow does it taper down towards the clasp end? It tapers down to about 18 millimeters. So while it starts out 22 up towards the top, it tapers down to be narrower than the Seiko. The Seiko's bracelet is 20 millimeters with no taper all the way through. Also, the Seiko bracelet has a mixture of polished center links with brushed edge links, I guess, for lack of a better word, whereas the Citizen watch, the entire bracelet is brushed. The clasp on both of these watches, I find that the clasp on the Citizen watch to be a better clasp than the one on the Seiko. They're similar. They're both double locking push button deployment clasps, but the Citizen is just made a little bit better. You also have a couple of extra micro adjustment holes on the Citizen. The Seiko just has 2. I guess technically the Citizen has 3, so you have 1 extra micro adjustment, but I can appreciate that. Both have solid end links though, so in that regard, that's nice. People typically don't like hollow end links. I generally, I guess, agree, although I've had plenty of watches with hollow end links that weren't an issue. I've had some that were rattly and noisy, and I didn't like them very much. Not an issue on either of these. They both have solid end links. The last thing to really talk about is the slide rule. Now on the Citizen, we have this external bidirectional bezel. Rotates both ways. It's snug. It doesn't want to slip very easily. It's got these little, coined edge kind of groove bezel. Overall, it's good. I'm not going to go into all the calculations that you can do with the slide rules on either of these watches. I did that in the main reviews. If you want to watch those videos, I encourage you if you're interested in one of these watches in particular. So we have the external slide rule bezel with an internal chapter ring that you line up those two, the chapter ring with the bezel to do your calculations. On the Citizen watch, we have an internal slide rule bezel, which is controlled by this crown. The crown is protected by crown guards, little lugs here. To spin the bezel, you just rotate this crown down at the 8 o'clock position. And again, you just line up the hash marks on the slide rule bezel to the hash marks on the chapter ring to do your calculations. So, like I previously mentioned, I think that one of the reasons why the Citizen watch appears so much bigger is because of that internal bezel. It just makes the dial kind of look real big and overwhelming compared to the size of the case, whereas the dial on our Seiko watch here is a little bit smaller, more compact, and you have more case, including that external bezel. That's why, in my opinion, this watch feels like it wears or appears to be a little bit bigger. You might disagree. You might think like, oh, that extra big black bezel on the outside of the case actually makes it look bigger. To me, you know, again, it's kind of apples and oranges. We're talking about differences, not the similarities. So yeah, that's my opinion on it. But basically, you know, that's the side-by-side comparison of these two watches that I wanted to give you guys. And again, they were completely and thoroughly reviewed previously. If you want to check out those other videos, I encourage you to do so. But yeah, I just wanted to give you a look at two very similar watches side by side. If you were curious, you know, trying to decide, do I want one of these watches, either or, which one would be the appropriate one for me, maybe this will help you get a better idea of which that you like better. Let me know down in the comments below which you prefer. I think if I had to pick one over the other, I would say I prefer the Seiko Flightmaster slightly. I don't know, probably just because I'm partial to Seiko watches, if I'm being honest. They're both great, though. I can't really give you any complaints about either. Alright, I appreciate you guys tuning in. That's my comparison video for today. Down in the notes below, you'll find links to my social media accounts, be it Facebook, Twitter. I also started an Instagram account recently, which I don't do a whole lot on, but if you're interested, you can check that out too. Also, my Patreon page link can be found down there, and if you'd like to support the channel and become a Patreon, that would be very helpful. I'll also put links to these watches to Amazon through my Amazon affiliate account. If you're interested in picking either of these watches up and you buy it through my affiliate link, it affords me a small commission, which helps support the channel so that I can get new pieces in to, you know, review and make videos on. Alright guys, I appreciate it. Until next time, bye.